Good morning, everybody. It's nice to have you with us. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to MER's webinar on Public Sector Solutions, Steps to Success with EV Charging Infrastructure. So my name's Chris Brennan. I am the Marketing and Events Executive for MER, and I will be your host for today. We are very lucky that we are joined by a few others. We have with us Andrew Shiel, who is the Senior EV Project Officer for Durham County Council. And from there, we have Sam Ivory, our Head of Public Sector Sales, and Lindsay Hetherington, our Associate Consultant from Fleet Services. So we'll go through a couple of things. So today's agenda, we'll start off with a little bit of housekeeping to begin with, and then I will hand over to Sam to give us an introduction into what makes a successful public sector EV charging project. Following that, we will introduce Andrew and Lindsay, who will come on and talk about the work that we've done with Durham County Council, and we'll be able to give you an insight into kind of all the ins and outs of what's gone on and all the projects that we've done for them so far. And then we'll move on at the end to a question and answer section. So in terms of housekeeping, excuse me, it's just to let you know, we are recording the webinar today, and it will be available via our YouTube channels, and there'll be links posted via LinkedIn, etc., and our website. So just to let you know, it is being recorded. And for the question and answer, what we're going to do is down in the bottom right hand side of your screen, you should see a chat box. Now, as we move through, there may be questions that come to you that you want to get down out straight away so you don't forget them. So write them into the chat box, and then what we'll do is we'll come together at the end and I will read out your questions, and one of the team will be able to answer that question for you and hopefully kind of give you all the information that you need. So without further ado, what we'll do is we'll hand over to Sam. Good morning, Sam. How are you?
Very well, Chris.
Fantastic. Okay, so we'll get started with what makes a successful public EV charging project. Over to you, Sam.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. Well, hopefully everyone can hear me loud and clearly. Yeah, my name is Sam Ilsley, and I'm the head of public sector at MER Public Charging. So I love what I do. I could talk to you for the whole hour probably, but I've been told to limit my section to 15 to 20 minutes. So I've tried to distill that down into two sort of key areas. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the running costs of the public EV networks and tariffs and what goes behind that. And then I'm going to sort of round up with 5 or 6 sort of key points of consideration really in terms of developing your strategies across your local authorities, and with a little bit of focus on Levi funding as well. So views expressed are my own, and I'm very happy to sort of answer questions and answers at the end, and outside of these 4 walls of your monitors, if people want to reach out direct, if we don't get round to all the questions or any other topics that we haven't touched on today, please do so. So I will move straight on into the first section. So public EV charging tariffs. Now, ZapMap are great, and they publish loads of stats and keeps their website pretty much regularly updated. So in the top left here, you can just see a little bit of a snapshot of what the average public tariffs for public EV charging were across the UK in October. So slow and fast charging, users were paying typically around 55 pence per kilowatt hour, and rapid charging, the average was around 79 pence per kilowatt hour. And you can see in the bottom left, MER's current tariffs. We're broadly in line with those rates. We're about mid-market, which is great. And MER, we're backed by Statkraft, who are Europe's largest renewable energy producer. They're the UK's largest PPA provider. So we buy all of our own renewable energy through our sister company Bright, which is supplied from Statkraft's generation assets. So we try and fix our energy tariffs annually, similar probably to the way that a lot of local authorities do so. and we blend the sort of gains and losses across our portfolio as we generate and energize new assets. So we have a fixed tariff currently from Durham down to Dorset. Wherever you are in the country, those are our rates. But I thought useful just to sort of be aware of, if you haven't already sort of come across it, is the guidance document there that I've linked in the bottom right, which is the Electric Vehicle Smart Charging Action Plan, which should see more hopefully time of use sort of tariffs coming in and being able to pass on some savings for overnight charging in the future. So I wanted to touch a little bit on the cost of running an EV car versus a petrol car, and then running an EV car both on home charging tariffs versus public tariffs. So according to very reliable source Google, the UK driver average is around 7,500 miles per year. And on my electric car, I'm currently averaging around 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour. So very simply, to do that sort of mileage, I would be using around 2,114 kilowatt hours of energy over the year. Now, if I was to drive the equivalent mileage in a petrol or diesel car at those prices, they're probably a month or so out of date since I did this slide, but you're looking around £1,500 or £1,200 on petrol or diesel. Now, compare that to charging at home. So I am lucky enough to have a driveway, and I use Octopus as my electricity provider at home. So I'm paying around 30p for my daytime tariff. So if I was to charge all of that energy on my daytime tariff, it would cost me around £650 a year. But I do get the benefit of a nighttime off-peak tariff of around 9p, which would only be around £200 a year. Now, to make it a more fair comparison, I've also just factored in your standing charge. So I pay 48 pence per day standing charge at home. So I factored in that cost and added it to those day or night tariffs, just to give an overall yearly cost of around £400 or £800 to charge my EV at home. Now, comparing that to charging on public network at those average rates at 55p, you're around £1,100-1,200, and on rapid charging, solely on rapid charging, would be around £1,600. So I did all this sort of quick maths, and then found, of course, that ZapMap had done something far more dynamic and probably representative of the real world. So I've, again, just put a little link on there to some of their resources here. But what I wanted to really sort of demonstrate or show is that driving EV, even on sort of the public tariffs and network that is out there, it's around the equivalent price of petrol is today. So what I wanted to then delve into is, well, why is there such a cost disparity between public and domestic charging? So I consulted good old social media, and I'll just flash up a little slide here of some comments I found on a recent sort of social media poll and post in terms of trying to understand what the level of understanding or education is there and around the sort of early adopters of EV vehicles, and what goes into public charging tariffs and rates. So you can see a very scientific poll here on the left-hand side. Around 750 people voted on what they would be prepared to pay for public rapid charging, and a sort of overwhelming sort of around 70% majority, I'd say, there saying they would only be prepared to pay between 40 and 50 pence. I think we've got a huge education sort of battle on our hands, both as a CPO but also as local authorities, to help engage and educate end customers, end drivers into what goes behind charging an EV car, and there's been a historic, I'd say probably unhelpful history of free charging and a lot of subsidies to help that initial uptake, and so there's this sort of hangover of people thinking that charging should be heavily discounted when that's maybe not sustainable in the long run. So what I wanted to flash up next was, why is there this disparity or difference between public and domestic charging and the price difference? So some very ballpark indicative costs of infrastructure over here on the left hand side. So a home charger, typical price maybe £1,100 or £1,200 to install one of these, and even some energy companies are still sort of doing deals, sort of giving them away for free almost with different tariffs. If you start to compare that to public infrastructure and the cost of public infrastructure, you've got things like street lamp, bollard chargers, which are sort of bolt on for between £3,500 and £4,000 maybe typically. You've got standalone fast chargers, which you see in the public with a new grid connection, around about £12,000. Standalone rapid chargers, 50 kilowatts, you're looking at £35,000 to £40,000. Ultra rapid charging, could be around £70,000. And then where it really goes into a different sort of kettle of fish is, ultra rapid hubs where you're accessing high voltage power, which means you have to deploy a new substation on the site. You're not going to get much change out of £100,000 plus for that. So really, you're looking at investments of probably £300,000 plus on these hub sites that are going in up and down the country. Now, those costs will vary wildly dependent on what the real connection with the DNO costs are and groundworks and other factors, but just to give a rough feel there for the crude cost of infrastructure. What really sort of hits home though in terms of the difference and why there is such a difference is the running cost of public infrastructure. And one of the main ones is the energy contracts themselves. So obviously CPOs have a business energy tariff, and that's comparable to then a domestic home tariff where domestic users get a 5% VAT rate versus a 20% VAT rate on CPOs. And Quinton Wilson, I think, has been great at championing, trying to level this disparity out and pass some of that saving on to end drivers who don't have a driveway that have to charge public and are being sort of penalised, if you like, with those what I think has been dubbed a sort of curbside tax. So that immediately puts the price of public charging up with a 20% VAT rate. But we're also looking at just much larger energy connections, grid connections in general, with larger meters, MOP contracts, and the associated costs we've got to pay for those. One of our grid connections could be the equivalent to 40 or 50 home domestic connections, so it's a much bigger energy connection that we're putting in. We've got standing charges with our energy providers, even on the smaller connections, 69 sort of kVA connections of around £1 a day. Where we go above 100 kVA or we have a half-hourly meter, we have kVA availability fees, which we've got to pay, which is 2.5 pence per kVA per day. So again, on these larger hub sites where you may maybe have a 1 MVA connection, you've got maybe a 20 or 25 pound a day standing charge and a 25 pound a day kVA fee, just as a base cost daily fees before you even start to sell any energy. You've then got maintenance costs, both planned and reactive maintenance. You see cases of vandalism up and down the country with cable connectors being cut off and things like that. We've got back office costs, 24/7 helpline, billing, contactless payment costs. We factor in having to renew our hardware, typically sort of maybe 7 or 8 years into the term of a project, and upgrade hardware. The government legislation that was released last week has new fines, some teeth behind it in terms of meeting a 99% reliability uptime for rapid charging. And then we've got our own staff overheads to sort of meet as well. And then, of course, we've got maybe a profit or revenue share with the landowner, which we provide as well. So what I'm just trying to demonstrate here that essentially it's very fine margins that we really operate on in the real world. And on a standalone fast charger, we've maybe only got a 9 or 10p differential between buy and sale of energy. and a lot of operating costs to sort of come out of that. So all of this goes behind why there is that differential between a 30p domestic tariff versus a 55p public tariff. So I wanted to wrap up that segment of the talk and just go on to 5 general areas just for consideration when developing your strategies and rollouts across your council areas. First one is to build a sinking fund for a rainy day. So what I mean by this is that the Levi funding that's out there at the moment is fantastic, but this grant funding and support isn't going to be around forever from central government. So councils really need to try and consider building a sort of sustainable business model, really, and putting aside some reserves for ongoing maintenance, repair, upgrade, expansion of infrastructure in their areas. Where Mayor typically funds infrastructure, we might do that on a 15-year contract, at the end of which it becomes the council's own property to do with as they wish. So if they want to then bring the operation of that in-house, you will need reserves to fund this stuff. The second one is around phasing the rollout of infrastructure in your area. So as you've just seen, the operational cost of all of this equipment is quite high. So if you install more assets than you need to, or assets in areas where the infrastructure simply isn't needed and it's not going to be used, that's just going to increase the price for everyone that everyone has to pay to make the business case stack up for the CPOs. So use what data you have that is available to you, work with the local residents, gauge interest in areas where to site these things appropriately, and use the data off the chargers themselves. Install 3 chargers in a car park, monitor how well they're used, and then expand that accordingly. Number 3, partner with the private sector. So local authorities, you're not experts in this equipment and this sort of infrastructure rollout, whereas the CPOs out there generally are. But what you are your experts in your local areas, and you understand the local geographies and challenges and unique opportunities that you have. So partner with the private sector, leveraging additional funding to maximize infrastructure across your area, and build that long-term partnership with the CPO, because these are often long-term contracts. So you want to work successfully to scale the infrastructure over time. Number 4, embrace innovation. I think the beauty of EV charging is that it is not a petrol pump. There are so many different options out there and ways to charge a car, which is fantastic. I'm trying to think of examples now, but we've seen councils install big sort of fleet charging setups at their headquarters, which are then empty over the weekend. And they've managed to open out those fleet chargers to the public to use over the weekend for public charging, and therefore make a little bit of money back in ways like that, which wouldn't be a normal sort of charging setup, if you like. We see sort of gullies and pop-up chargers for on-street challenges coming out. There's EV car clubs, which are fantastic to sort of build into your programs. Battery storage, solar, it goes on and on. So just really be open to those innovations and pilot what you can. And lastly, stakeholder engagement within your organization. So this is probably a nice lead into some of the discussion that Lindsay and Andrew are going to have in a minute, but don't underestimate how many departments within a council this sort of project touches. It's going to touch on your legal team, your highway team, your parking team, energy, procurement, finance, local councillors. The list is endless. But I think in our experience, I think the 2 longest sort of lead times or areas really do revolve around some of the legals, both in terms of contracting with a CPO, but also being involved with the DNO, the district network operator, and new grid connections, and sorting out way leaves and things on those can take a considerable amount of time sometimes. So as a bonus one, learn from resources that are out there. There are great things like the Senex heads of terms that can help with those legal sort of groundwork early on. Learn from the local authorities. Don't reinvent a strategy. If you've got a local authority next door that are very similar to you, look at what they've done, learn from them, talk to them, and all these other useful resources out there. So I'll wrap up there because I think that's my 20 minutes, and hand over to you, Chris.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Sam. That was a really in-depth kind of look at the various different facets of public charging. So I think that's a great start. Thank you. So moving swiftly on, what we'll do is we'll introduce Andrew Shield, who is, as I said earlier, the Senior Electric Vehicle Project Officer for Durham County Council, and Lindsay Hetherington, who is an associate consultant for our Fleet and Workplace division up in the northeast of England. So we are going to be talking about the public side of things and also a little bit of fleet as well. So hopefully we'll be able to kind of cover both areas of that. So good morning, Andrew and Lindsay.
Morning.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you. As Chris said, I'll be introducing Andrew, and we'll go through all of the infrastructure that we've provided for Durham, who we've worked with for around over 6 years now on a range of charging infrastructure. And I personally work with primarily the public sector organisations to help and advise them on transitioning to electric with the right charging equipment at the right place at the right time. So it's nice for us to work with Durham. Our head office is in Concert in Durham County Council area. So it's a nice little area to work in. So I'll just introduce Andrew. Can you tell us a little bit about you and your role within the council?
Yeah, sure. Morning, everyone. So, like touched on, I'm the project officer at Durham County Council. Haven't been involved in the project as long as Lindsay's been here. I've only been involved for about a year there now, but relatively new to the role. We formed an EV team probably about this time last year, I think, and then I joined shortly after Christmas. But yeah, we've been working in the local authority finance departments for over 25 years now. So, well experienced in challenges faced by a local authority, getting funding, red tape, different departments that always have to have a say in, various different decisions. So, excited to be as part of this role and help the county towards low carbon and getting some EV chargers in.
Great. Do you think having a kind of a dedicated EV team is a kind of better route to go down to get some funding and that kind of thing? Because I bet some local authorities don't actually have that.
I would say so, yeah. I mean, before the team was created, there was only one officer here. And then, she had to do everything, whether that be, looking at the policies, looking at the funding options, and then obviously project managing as well. I know there are other local authorities up here who only have one person doing the job, and even that can be, every Thursday and Friday. This is what they do as part of their duties. So to cram in everything that comes with an EV project into those 2 days is, I don't know how they do it, to be honest. We've got a team of 3, soon to be 4 here, and we're busy all the time with various tasks, from just finding locations to liaising with elected members or public organisations.
Do you think that's helped kind of access the government funding that you've got as well? So I once kind of heard that if you don't actually go and seek it, you'll not get it.
Yeah, you do have to go and seek it, put your applications in, get opinions of other departments as well, policy teams, people who have been in legal bid writing, etc. So it is essential to have that experience there. And if your EV team hasn't got it, then if you can build those relationships with the other departments within the local authorities, they can be a great help as well. And yeah, we were successful in quite a substantial bit of grant funding, which has been critical to getting these charges in the ground.
Great. What's been the kind of main drivers for Durham County Council's net zero strategy and the transition to EV? Can you share a bit more about the progress that's been made so far?
Yeah, well, in 2019, Durham County Council declared a climate emergency, and we are committed to reducing carbon emissions by 2030. So, one of the major contributing factors was the emissions from ICE vehicles, so the internal combustion engines. So, we did, we sought government funding to install EV charging across the county in order to provide those facilities that we will hope will encourage the public to switch to EVs. A lot of the housing we have in Durham, I think about 40, maybe 41% is terrace that doesn't have off-street parking. So if we can install public charge points for them, it gives them the opportunity to, people who may not have bought an EV because they've got nowhere to charge it, this will give them that encouragement to do so. I think so far we've upgraded and installed approximately 200 EV charge points across the county. And we obviously plan to continue that with MER throughout 2024 and beyond if we can keep getting funding.
That's excellent. I think it kind of helps the community. When they see the chargers there, they've got a little bit more trust in getting an electric vehicle, haven't they?
It does, yeah. I mean, I think years ago, certainly, maybe even just last year, EV charge points you would see that weren't working or they'd been hit by somebody and they were just left like that for month on end.
Yeah.
Whereas, it is, we're trying to reinstall that confidence in the network and in the public that the network is capable of being installed and being maintained.
Yeah, I think with a lot of local authorities, a lot of the chargers that were installed were under kind of past funding that may be a bit redundant now. They didn't have maintenance contracts on them. They didn't have a network. So I think we've learned a lot from that. So just to kind of, we're even kind of swapping those out and bringing them up to kind of speed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Sam touched on it before. There was a lot of charges that were put in which were almost free to use, or it was £1 to go, and that was subsidies for them. They don't exist anymore. The charges have to be appropriate, especially if we're providing electric. We need to get that charge back, and then obviously bank some credit for future maintenance.
Definitely. What type of chargers are you installing then in the area?
We have done a good mix really between AC and DC chargers. We've got 7 kilowatt chargers where you're looking at long dwell times where people can plug in for multiple hours at a time. 22 kilowatt chargers where people may just be at the shops for 3 or 4 hours and they can go in, park up, get a charge, come back, and then they're on the way. And occasional 50. I think we may even have had some upgrades to ultra rapids on occasions, which will give really quick charges where the vehicles can take that type of charge. So yeah, a good mix. But it's just sort of identifying what sort of each location is used for. So some will be long dwell times. Sometimes people will only be there an hour, 2 hours. So yeah, it's identifying how those occasions are used.
Yeah, it's interesting. Have you looked at the street lamp charging at all? Is that something?
We've kind of looked at it. It's something we would like to get involved in, but the majority of our streetlights are at the back of the path, like the house side, as opposed to curbside. So you've then got that issue of bringing the cable to the curb, whether that be running the cable under the flagstones or tarmac to a curbside bollard, which could then be the actual charge outlet, if you like, just to avoid any tripping hazards. So it's something we would like to figure out how to overcome, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, I think it's quite controversial, that a little bit, and brings its challenges, definitely. As we were saying, having charging infrastructure in place that's got the correct maintenance, the servicing that's required. How was it important to work with a kind of EV provider that offered that for your fleet, for your kind of public and fleet network?
Yeah, we thought it was essential. Could we go out and buy a load of chargers and get our electricians to install them? Probably. Would it be done as well as a professional in the market could do? Probably not. Maintaining them, servicing them, back office support, that's not something we could provide. We don't have the manpower or the funding to do that. So yeah, it was essential really that MER could come along and do a full turnkey installation, but also that comprehensive aftercare support package as well. we do get a lot of people will phone up and say, the charger's down. We've got that 24-hour support where we can do a remote reset, or we can book in for maintenance.
Yeah, I think that's important, especially when you've got public-facing chargers, and people are not hesitant to get on social medias and shout about them if they're not working. So having that kind of vital support that you can kind of pass it on, then you don't have to have any involvement in that. I think for us, like, the hardware is very similar. It's that maintenance and that service level that's kind of most important to us as well, to offer that. So I think that's really important, and I'm sure you've kind of experienced a lot of other challenges with the rollout of the infrastructure. What have you experienced so far? What do you think you're going to experience in the future?
It's all been fine, Lindsay. It's gone no problem at all. Site identification's been tricky. Trying to actually, once you find a site, it may look great, and then once you get into the cost of actually connecting to Northern Power Grid, the costs can be astronomical, or there may be some sort of land ownership contentious issue, maybe owned by a charity. There could be old mine shafts nearby, which just, to the public, the site looks great, and then we've got to then get across to them, or we can't go there. And so I site identification, ensuring it's council owned, it's existing car parking. Otherwise, it's a change of use planning application, which then increases costs, increases delays, and nobody wants to be tarmacking over greenbelt or anything. So Northern Power Grid, let's say, cost connections to the DNO can be quite off-putting, because they can be great, can be no problem at all, but they do make some sites completely impossible. Also, sort of public resistance to locations we select. We may find a good car park, but people will park the works vans there on the weekend, and people don't want an EV charger there because no one's got an EV charger, and say, well, if we put an EV charger in, they might get an EV car. And it's having some interesting conversations with community groups. But we've also come across a few occasional sites that are in and around heritage locations, which they obviously don't want a charge point near that location, whether that be a stately home or a site of natural interest. So there is occasions to potentially change how the feeder pillar looks, or micrositing alterations as to where you're going to put the actual charge point at the other end of the car park, for example. So
interesting. I think especially with the DNO, that's probably your main challenge, isn't it? And kind of managing expectations from community of picking locations, and you've got to say no. What do you think? It's kind of important to work with the DNO quite closely. You've got a good relationship with them, haven't you? We
have. We've been in touch with them a lot, more so lately with installation ramping up. We are getting more and more regular working groups with them. So I'd say it's important to have it's kind of like a principal contact there who you could go to resolve any issues, whether that be high DNO costs, or maybe some site quirks that may have came up on their auto design tool, which they have online. So it is I would say key to have a close relationship with them. Someone who we can maybe rely on or lean on to give you some support where needed.
Yeah, I think because we're not kind of I'm not technically minded as such, and having even kind of working with ourselves to liaise with the DNO and manage that relationship again on your behalf, I think is really important, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, even just understanding, that why the DNO can't go to one position, but they could go somewhere else within the same car park. And, maybe why one side of the car park's £5,000 and the other side's £20,000, and you've then got that information in the armory when you're talking to like local residents or community groups as to why it needs to go where it needs to go. So
Brilliant. So finally, on the public side, what is your advice for kind of public sector bodies that are maybe just starting to install infrastructure in the community?
I mean, I would say definitely have a dedicated full-time EV person. Certainly, if you can stretch that to a team, absolutely key to go for it, because you can really, there's so many tasks involved you know, when I came aboard, I was stunned at how hard it is to actually get an EV charge on the ground. You know, once you actually win the funding, you've then got to manage getting the charger in place, and it's been unbelievable. So if you can spread that out between 2, 3, 4 people, it's a huge help. Like I said, you know, just menial admin tasks to arranging group meetings or going out on site visits. I would say that's key. Then obviously once you do get that in place, you know, you can think about other departments within the council that you need to have involved, which so far I've got a bit of how to write this list down, because I even though I'm probably still forgetting certain departments, but we've got policies team, we've got the highways team, parking services, planning, legal, property and land team, the transport team, ecology, heritage team, finance colleagues. Going to have elected members and community groups, and I've probably missed some out there, but the list is just goes on and on. I think, you know, we've probably involved every department in the council so far. I mean, even like the housing, you know, we say to them, is it okay to go on your land? So there's all sorts of departments we're talking to. And even now, you know, you'll have somebody come up and say, well, you haven't consulted me on this. So always be prepared for someone to come along and ask for, you know, that they have to have their input on it.
Yeah, I think it's ever growing, isn't it?
It is. It just goes on. I think that the more the project grows, there's always somebody else who finds out about the charge point going in somewhere, and they'll say, well, actually, you haven't asked me yet. Yeah. And yeah, it's, you know, even, you know, well, obviously a big one on there I've missed off, health and safety. You know, not that we haven't been liaising with them, but yeah, health and safety, they get involved in signing off, you know, construction phase plans and RAMS packs. So, and it's all time consuming. You know, if you had one person doing all this, it would take you a month just to do one charge point. You won't be trying to put hundreds in.
I think that leads nicely into our kind of work with your fleet transition. So we're looking at installing chargers at fleet depots for the transition of the electric fleet for the council. What benefits did you hope it would bring for staff and an organisation as a whole to transition the fleet to electric?
Yeah, I mean, it touches back to the DCC's commitment to, you know, reducing carbon. And one of the big parts of that was converting the fleet to electric where possible. I was speaking to a fleet manager recently. In total, we've got around about 1,000 fleet vehicles. Yeah. So that'll be, you know, cars, small vans, big vans, trucks, ride-on lawnmowers, all sorts. So I think really what we want to do is reduce that fleet, but also convert what we reduce it to. So maybe 1,000 vehicles down to 700, 600, but make sure those 600 or 700 are electric. I think over the next year, we plan to take on about 60 electric vehicles. We've already got an EV refuse vehicle, but, you know, they are painfully expensive compared to the regular vehicles. So it is going to be a slow process, but if we get these vehicles in, we need to ensure the infrastructure is there, so that, you know, we're putting this infrastructure in our main depots where vehicles can charge overnight or then charge during the day if there's, you know, shift work. But also understand how those vehicles are used. If I say a vehicle's used on a constant cycle, it'll need a rapid charger or an ultra rapid to make sure it's charged quickly. Especially the rural depots, you know, it's quite a rural county where people can be, you know, an hour until they get to the centre of Durham from somewhere in the outskirts. And if they're going to need to stop out in the rural areas, they need a quick charge. So we'll look and try and get a rapid charge in the depots so they can stop there for a lunch break, make it back to headquarters, sort of thing. So, but yeah, it's essentially, you know, we'll get this infrastructure in so the services don't suffer. You know, we need to complete the duties, whether that be sort of Care Connect, you know, going out to the most vulnerable, or whether it be, you know, just people going out and maintaining road signs or whatever it may be. So, you know, we need to ensure that range anxiety isn't there, and that they know there's a good range where people can go to.
Yeah, it's like you're looking at a whole new fleet strategy, isn't it? By bringing EV into the mix, changing everything that you do, but also kind of the mindsets of the drivers and how they kind of drive. It's an education piece as well, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It is changing that sort of mindset of, you know, how people work. And Yeah, it's going to be an interesting
Yeah.
year or so.
Interesting. So what vehicles did you transition first?
Firstly, I think it was largely driven by what was available on the market. So it was, suitable vans with a good range and good charging capabilities. So I think we went with quite the smaller vans, maybe Peugeots and Citroens at the moment. So we've gone with a lot of those, but let's say it's going to be a slow process by the time, we only get so much to spend per year on the fleet to convert them over. So but it's really been down to our fleet manager to see how many vans we could get for the budget. I think obviously there will be a desire to convert, the tipper trucks and all the rest of it, but again, it's all about budget and pricing.
So what type of charging infrastructure have you installed already into some of the depots?
So far we have several 22 kilowatt chargers installed. We're looking to try and get another 4 or 5 more installed sort of over the next couple of months. Once those are finalized, we're going to look at potentially putting some rapid charging in at our more rural locations, which, like I say, should some of our vehicles be, way out in the hills in the middle of nowhere. It's about, if they do some routes on the way, they could easily do 100 miles to get there. They'll want to charge there, then potentially 50, 60 miles back by the time they do the, zigzagging across the county and all the rest of it. So obviously we don't want those staff sitting around at a depot in the middle of nowhere for 4 hours, 5 hours getting a charge. So we're trying to put the quickest chargers in we can, so they can just have their lunch break, cars charge, and they'll get back to carry on their service duties.
Yeah, I think doing it in a phase kind of rollout is the best, because you can utilize your network and your portal to then justify the need for more chargers or higher speed chargers in different locations. Because I think you say, we need that there, but theoretically people might be there for kind of 45 minutes. And what we do see is some of the buildings are older, aren't they? So we can't always put in rapid charging equipment.
Yeah, some of the electricity supply to them isn't great. Like we mentioned before, DNO cost, putting a new connection in, it would just be absolutely unbelievable costs. So each site's got its own little quirk. Each site's different. But yeah, just do a review. Get your Merton come out and do the reviews and survey reports for each site to see what electricity supply is. That's then checked by our electrical sort of team, our CCS team, who approve reports and see what we can and can't do. And then if it can't be done, then we see what the cost of MPG connections are. And unfortunately, they do tend to be a bit over the top.
That's the preferred option, isn't it? But it's not always the case that we can bring them in. So like, to kind of combat that, we've got things like load balancing and smart charging. How has that benefited yourselves?
Yeah, I mean, it's allowed us to use various vehicles at the same time with load balancing. Excuse me. But MERS, the backdata system, and the reports can, and show us how they're being utilized. So we can use that with our fleet managers to say, well, you've only got 2 or 3 chargers out of the 4 or 5 being used here. You need to, potentially move more of your vans to this site and charge them there, or chargers not being utilized correctly, or they can tell us where where chargers need to go, and we can then see how that's being used. We can see if it's being used through the night, through the day. If there's not a van charging there through the night, why isn't there? Could there be another one put there? So yeah, we can really use those to see, we're using these chargers as much as we can.
Yeah, definitely. I think the nice kind of thing on the portal as well is that CO2 savings. But what you can pass on to kind of marketing contacts, that kind of thing to.
Yeah, so I can show us obviously, carbon savings, kilowatts used, etc. So we can pass that data on back onto our sort of green economy experts, so we can work out how many tons of CO2 is being saved compared to the diesel vans being used and the mileage used, etc. But also obviously for recharging, whichever services is using it, whether it be clean and green team, whether it be highways van, whether it be a Care Connect van, we can rebill those services directly for kilowatts used, and then whatever charge we put on top of that to pay for future maintenance.
Yeah, that's good, because you don't kind of think about that section, do you? About the rebilling, because it's all different departments. You just think, oh, it's free because it's free.
Yeah,
Necessarily.
yeah, it's yeah. So, but I mean, I know Sam mentioned before, obviously, the cost of electricity. I was a bit taken back by how much it actually costs us, and that the small margin for profits or revenue that you can make there's not a great deal when you have to factor in what that's got to pay for in the background.
And it's factoring in that maintenance contract as well. So, but I think with the portal, we can have, and you can have a kind of good view of chargers that may be offline or faulted, and that gives us a bit of a quicker ammunition to get there, get them fixed, or log in remotely and see what the issue is. So 9 times out of 10, really, the driver won't experience any issues with the charger. It'll be fixed immediately before they kind of plug in, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, use your remote reset, tends to sort out what it is, or maybe the old switch off, switch back on again. The IT favorites can work from time to time, but generally, they're quite reliable. It tends to be, local hooligans smashing them or snapping bits off or putting things into them that they shouldn't be. That tends to cause an issue. But obviously that shouldn't be happening in fleet, you would hope, but more public than fleet, but you never know. So yeah.
I suppose you can't control any of that, can you? No. Unfortunately. Yeah. So what's been kind of the biggest challenges you've experienced so far in bringing or transitioning the fleet to electric and installing EV charging infrastructure in the depots? I know a lot of it is power capacity, isn't it?
Yeah, we've had capacity to the buildings. Let's say any report that MER does needs to be approved by our internal design electrical team. So they do require that we leave spare capacity for potentially other upgrades to the building, be that air source, heat pumps, solar, etc. So whilst the power may be there, we're trying to put that argument across that we need it. That there is a bit of resistance internally that the power should be kept for other uses, potentially for getting green energy in the future. So that can be a bit of resistance. And again, I say, if we can't come off building supplies, it's then back to the cost of upgrading from the DNO, from the Northern Power Grid connection. If the power's not sufficient. So yeah, it is just liaising with other departments to approve the install. Tends to be the main challenge, really. I think everybody wants them, but there's a bit of resistance to give up capacity.
Yeah. I think that really highlights the importance of working with a provider like ourselves to come in, do a full kind of haul of the building, provide that electrical survey, but kind of taking into account future-proofing options, and being able to kind of provide you with a full breakdown of the electrical capacity and what we're actually going to do on site before anything's signed off, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like looking at asbestos routes and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, so the asbestos team, there's another team we've got to liaise with. Another one for the list.
So are there any plans in the future in terms of electrifying more vehicles and expanding your charging network?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the goal will be that everything will be decarbonised and gone electric at some point in the future. It's probably going to take a good few years for us to do that. But like I mentioned before, it'll be a combination of reducing the numbers of vehicles on fleet, but also converting what's left to EV. So we're going to have to get the charging networks going to have to grow as well. We're going to have to continually upgrade installations and get more installations to deal with that capacity. I mean, I think at the moment we're sat around 40 to 50 EVs potentially at the moment on the council fleet. So, when that gets into the hundreds, we're really going to have to get a lot more installations in place on fleet and, depot buildings and maintenance buildings. So, in addition to that, our drivers, they will be permitted to use public network of charging as well, not just fleet. So, if they are out and about and there's not a fleet charger nearby, there will be, permitted to use public charging networks as a fallback until we get our installations up to speed.
Brilliant. I think you've done a really good job, and it's quite nice to see chargers popping up here, there and everywhere. And I think, for a local authority, you've done a brilliant, or you've made a great impact so far in EV charging. So it would be nice to share what we've done elsewhere.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it can be difficult, being publicly funded, because obviously everything you do is scrutinized. So it is hard to get things right, and we've got that many questions to answer before we can do anything. It takes its time.
No, we've done a brilliant job so far. So thank you so much for sharing that, and I'll jump back to Chris for the questions now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. I think the conversations that you've been having there, it's prompted quite a few questions coming in this morning, so that's really positive. So I think what we'll do now is we'll move into the Q&A section, and I'll kind of go in the same order that we kind of talked in this morning. So the first one, Sam, I think came up in response to the pricing structure. And the question, I don't know whether we'll be able to answer this or not, was, can we explain why Tesla can offer 150 kilowatt DC charging for 37 to 42p per kilowatt hour, when others, for example, InstaVolt, are charging almost double that?
Yeah. I mean, great question. Whoever answered that, but I guess my response to that is that Tesla probably have a very different business model to InstaVolt. Tesla's primary business is a car manufacturer. They want to sell cars, and that's probably where they make the bulk of, if they are finally profit making. Secondly, they manufacture their own charging stations. So I think, primarily they've been building a network for their own cars, and they're at that rate, they're not making any money. I would say they're basically just covering the energy price. So they'd be operating those stations typically probably at a loss, my guess is. Where they do provide those Tesla stations for the wider public, I believe they charge around 51 to 61p, and they also have an idle charge, which is an eye-watering £1 a minute. So I expect they do make a little bit of money or cover their operating costs on those public stations by charging a higher tariff, compared to InstaVolt, who they are, if you like, just a CPO, having to buy their own third-party hardware, and operate it and try and make ends meet. So
yeah, I suppose having a billionaire in your corner isn't the worst thing really when looking at that kind of thing. So another one. So there's quite a few come in for yourself, Andrew. So one of them is a question wondering whether your finance background is a benefit, or do you still have to go to all these other departments for extra help?
I wouldn't say it's been a benefit, no. A lot of the applying for grant funding was kind of done before I've even came on board, to be fair. But in terms of having a finance mind, it's certainly helpful when you're looking at the budget monitoring. We've got budget systems we can look at. Oracle, I don't know if anybody uses Oracle, that's generally where our budget sits. So, just having, we've got a finance team we've had to rely. Sorry, I'm getting attacked by a spaniel here. He's just decided to jump on us. We do have a finance team who have worked out, business models for, how much we should be charging and how much kilowatts per hour we're charging. So we do have to rely on our finance experts considerably as well. So yeah, I wouldn't say, no matter what background you've come from, you could certainly take this on with plenty of training, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, kind of, it's almost following on from that one, really. Somebody's asked, what is it that makes a good EV charging team for a council? So obviously you've talked about the various teams that you've had to link in with, but in terms of your specific team, what is it that has kind of worked so well for you with the team that you've got?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, having reliable staff, people who are certainly have a passion for what they do. If you've got an interest in sort of vehicles and, this sort of technology, then obviously the overall goal is ultimately to reduce carbon and head towards that green economy. So I think as long as you've got an interest in that, and you do actually find it, a rewarding job, then I think you're onto a winner. Yeah. Let's say personally, I came from a finance background, and then I seen the chance to join an EV team, and I thought, EVs was something that was really interesting to me, and then learning about how, the project management could go. So, but in terms of, other staff that we've got working with us, if you've got, people who are, analytical, finance minded, they're outgoing, they like ringing people up and, having conversations with people that can be a little bit challenging at times, and they don't mind, explaining or, taking the questions away and getting an answer. I think that helps a lot.
Mm-hmm. It's very important that you've got the right people around you, and it sounds like you definitely have. So obviously during your section there, you said about kind of public meetings and consultations that you've had on different sites, etc. I know that we, as a charge point operator, Lindsay, you've done some of those yourself. Yeah. But as a council, what's it been like having those meeting and consultations? What's the mood been like? How have the public reacted to it?
Challenging. We often get asked, why haven't we put a charger here? How long will it take? Why will it take 3 or 4 months to do? Why are we charging 55p a kilowatt hour when they can charge at home for 10 pence? And it's a lot of educating people. I've been massively educated over the last 10 months sat in this role as to the prices in the background, or why we can't go this side of the car park, we've got to go to the other side of the car park. So but generally people have started off, I don't want to say aggressive, but certainly in your face, and then once you have a chat with them, they kind of realize all the hurdles you've got to jump through. But majority of people will complain because they just don't understand the background behind what we can and can't do. So I think it's, if you go in with an open mind and just accept that people are going to challenge you, you are going to get a lot of questions. But just as long as you can provide them with answers, or you're happy to go away and get the answer for them, they tend to be quite all right about it.
I think, what we've done going forward now is kind of bringing the community and putting those engagement groups in place a little bit more frequently, aren't we? So we're going to do some community centre engagements, events when we put some chargers in, just to bring everybody in and give them that education piece, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable as well. If I didn't know anything about EVs and somebody said, I want to put one in the car park at the end of the street, I'd be thinking, well, why? We haven't got an EV. Why don't you put it at the car park up the road? And it's I think there's a lot of misinformation out there as well, and it's trying to just have these conversations with people. And like I say, after an hour, generally, it's a good. We learn as well. The community knows their area better than we do, so it's good to have those two-way conversations.
I suppose in a strange way, some of those complaints are still positive in that if they're asking why aren't you putting a charger here, it shows the public are actually more keen to uptake with EVs, which is positive. And somebody else has asked, kind of on the flip side, from moving from the public, kind of what is the mood with your drivers at the moment with the potential move to EV? How are they are they embracing the potential changes coming up?
I'm told that they are. I was having conversations with our fleet manager, who's been more involved with the hands-on side of it with the drivers, and he always said that pretty much everyone who was new to it had a worry about the range anxiety. I think they would always say, well, the van only does 250 miles on the charge, and I say, well, how far do you do in a day? 100 miles. Well, then what's the problem? And it was, I think once people had used them for a few days, I'm told that they were absolutely fine with it. No issues at all. So I think as long as the drivers are kind of educated on how to plug the vehicle in, it's just basic stuff like that. Like you would do with the diesel, don't leave it on the fumes with the one light on. Plug it in, fill it up, have it ready for the next person to go. But yeah, so I'm told initially there was a lot of resistance to it, but once they've actually used it, they prefer it.
Excellent. Okay. I think we've maybe got time for one last one in, and this is kind of potentially one for Lindsay and for Andrew. So it was, what can be done at the initial and kind of the first stage of infrastructure install to make sure that future upgrades are, they're easier. So in terms of the future proofing, what can we look out for to make sure that we've got the future covered, basically?
I think on our side is certainly going in, carrying out that site survey, looking at all aspects of the building, but also liaising with the council on what you want to do in the future. So we found that heat pumps is quite a popular thing. And what we tend to do is look at kind of smart charging networks in which we can implement initially, put the infrastructure in place for that. And then when we come to increase the charges, we can kind of set that up when we've already installed one or two. We can have that kind of in the background working. So we can see, for example, we can install a feeder pillar which has 100 amp supply, put a couple of chargers in and then increase that. But it's got smart charging networks, so they all talk to each other and deliver what and when they can. So that's a good future proofing option. Andrew, I don't know if you want to kind of expand on that.
Yeah, I think to be fair, we're having a conversation with one of our main depot buildings at the minute anyway. We're saying, can we pull X amount of power to the sort of distribution board or feeder pillar, where we would only use maybe a small percentage of that at the moment for one or two installs, but maybe in 2 years' time or a year's time, even when we see there's a greater need for charging, we can simply add on to that and pull some more power from it. So, but again, it's working with Lindsay and the team just to see, what those costs are going to be like. Is future-proofing the site not doable because of budget restraints at the minute? Can we just put 2 chargers in and get the power to do those 2 chargers, or can we go that extra mile?
Yeah, it's important to know we can ramp up the power up and down with the smart charging networks to facilitate.
Okay. Right. Well, I think that kind of brings us nicely to the end of it now. I think we've covered all the questions that were in there. A lot of them were of a very similar ilk, so I've kind of grouped them together in that sense. But I'd like to kind of say thank you to all of our attendees today. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to come and join us. But especially thanks to Andrew, to Sam, and to Lindsay for leading us through a fantastic session there. So I really appreciate you giving up your time, which is limited at the moment, I understand. So it's been fantastic that we could all get together. And just to say that obviously the recording of this will be made available kind of hopefully by the end of today, hopefully as soon as possible. And obviously if you've got any further questions, then please do get in touch with us, and we'll answer as best we can and guide you as you move forward on your infrastructure journey, which, as we've heard today, is a long one, is a one kind of marked with pitfalls, but there are always solutions. And so if you've got any questions, please do reach out. And so thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you all.